My name is Dr. Faith, and I teach ethics here at the Offit School of Business. And I also serve as the director of this Lorentzsen Center for Faith and Work, where our goal is to advance the vision of dialogue at the intersections of faith, values, and our working lives. Thank you for coming today. I see a lot of new faces, and some faces I last saw last year when Norm was presenting. Thank you for coming. For this opening session, thank you for filling the room. I'm very, very happy to see that. Welcome to all of Ed's family who are here today to support him. Welcome also to Chris. Chris, if you wave to the crowd like you're in church. Chris is our new interim executive director for the School of Business. So I just wanted to point him out so you know. Shall we pray together? Thank you, God, for the gift of a beautiful day, the gift of all these wonderful humans in the room, the gift of this college that was established for your glory, the gift of Ed, who has served the state of North Dakota and the nation as a whole for many decades. Thank you for each of us and for the vocations you have called us to. May we be faithful to those callings. Bless the food we're about to receive, bless the hands that made it, and bless the fellowship around the table. Amen. Enjoy your lunch. Excuse my intrusion into your lunch. Now I invite my good friend, Dr. Davery, to take us through the rest of this morning.
First Lady Nancy and President Kraft. I've got the right order today. Offit School namesake Ronald. Interim Director of the Offit School. Where is he? Chris Mason, okay. I may have missed somebody, but you get the idea. I'm delighted to welcome you to this series that features every year a distinguished leader from our community in what we call the Leadership Legacy Series. And today we welcome Governor Ed Schaefer to this series. In addition to the title of Governor, it would be accurate to introduce him as Mr. Secretary, as President, or CEO, reflecting his public service as Secretary of Agriculture, as interim president of the University of North Dakota, and as CEO of Gold Seal Corporation. But there are other titles which might apply as well. I'll mention a few, not all. Mechanic would apply, reflecting his work rebuilding and maintaining vintage cars, or actor for his appearances in the TV series Junkyard Wars. I think he's up for an Emmy. We'll have to watch that. Or we could call him athlete for his participation in both the New York and Boston marathons. You might not have known that. Or as builder for his role in peeling logs for the Schaefer cabin in Medora. Or his remodeling single-handedly his townhouse. Or as most significant in this setting, honorary cobber by virtue of his marriage to Nancy. We could accurately refer to Ed as Energizer Ed, with reference to his ongoing activities as an adjunct professor at both North Dakota State University and the University of North Dakota, where I know he is also in partnership there with Nancy. His service on several philanthropic and cultural ventures, including especially the Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation, and then his participation in several for-profit ventures as well. The governor's achievements have resulted in several honors, including an honorary doctorate from his alma mater, the University of North Dakota, being named North Dakotan of the Year by the North Dakota Chamber of Commerce. And here's one I really like, Person of the Year, named by the Common Sense Club. Now there's an award we could all aspire to. There is more, but you get the idea for the title Energizer Ed. But the governor's favorite titles actually are husband to Nancy, father to 5, including a foster son, and grandfather to 13. In my view, the governor's public life has always been distinguished by clarity of purpose, accessibility, candor, authenticity, and deep, well-articulated values and convictions. His life and career are thus well aligned with the mission of this college, which is to influence the affairs of the world by sending into society thoughtful and informed men and women dedicated to the Christian life. His life also reflects the goal of the Lorentzsen Center, named for a man of deep ethical character, for the purpose of assisting students and public leaders in integrating their life and their faith, their work, and their convictions. Our format today is going to be one that you have recognized from past events. We'll begin with a brief statement by the governor, then the two of us will engage in conversation for a period of time, and then we will open it up for questions with the understanding that each person gets one opportunity for a question so we can get around to all of you. I hope that you will join me in welcoming our legacy leader, the Honorable Ed Schaefer.
Thank you, Dr. Dovry. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here in the Offutt School of Business and representing the Lorentzsen Leadership Luncheon. I do. I really am excited to be here. My education was in business. My career was in business. My leadership has been both in the public and private sector. And I appreciate the introduction that you gave. I'm a little humbled by all those words, and I was thinking that that might have been longer than my comments are going to be today. But thank you for your words. I was thinking about what to talk about today, and this is a little different format than I'm used to. Now, I like to stand up with the podium with some prepared comments. That way you get to control the conversation. But this way, Dr. Dovry is going to have his word in where we go. But the other thing is I'm used to having an opponent on the other side of the moderator, so you have to be pretty careful about what you say and don't say and things. So we're going to have an open, free opportunity here today to talk about what's on our minds, and I especially appreciate the focus of the Lorentzsen Luncheons on faith and work. As Dr. Dovry mentioned, the intersection and the interaction between faith and work is the way that I've lived my life, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that today. Dr. Dovry and I met for coffee earlier this week and had a chat about the format and what kinds of things to talk about. And one of the things he was mentioning was what was the influence that your father had on your faith. And as an interesting concept, I dug out this book. This book was put together by my dad in 1924, when his father died. My grandfather died when my dad was 16, and after his dad died, he put together a book from 1924 to 1929 of clippings of newspapers, magazines, sayings he's heard, things like that. And I dug it out and brought along this printed copy. I have the original one stuck away, but this printed copy, and I was reading through it, and there are some pretty interesting things back here that came across my dad's mind. He gave it to me when I was 16 years old so that I would have some feeling about who he is and what he stood for and things. But as I walked into this room today and came up on the podium, my mind came to this comment that he put in here. And he said, "Not for a day can I discern my way, but this I surely know. Who gives the day will show the way, and I securely go." So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And it reminds me, as I listen to your introduction, that of all the positions that we've had the honor to hold, Nancy and I have had the chance to serve all over the world, really, and especially to commit ourselves to service for the state of North Dakota. And as we have walked through that life of the ups and downs, the heres and theres, the opportunities that we've been presented, Nancy and I have developed a theme for our lives, and that is the sign of God is you will be led where you did not expect to go. So I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad to have been led here with the opportunity. Thank you for the invitation, Faith, and for Dr. Dovry and Dr. Kraft. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Appreciate it, and let's get on with the show.
All right. Anything more to say about your father's influence?
Well, my father was influential in my life by his example.
Okay.
He was not a churchgoer. That came from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
But he carried him a faith and a work ethic delivered by that faith.
Okay.
That was important. He lived that life by example,
Mm-hmm.
and he always said, the good Lord put me here to do good work on this earth, and that's what I'm going to do. And he lived that life. He lived a life of service. He lived a life of helping other people, of a helping hand, of support for the community and for people. And it was really based on his faith. And it has only been in later years kind of when I realized, because he wasn't expressive about his faith,
Mm-hmm.
Other than his, I think, daily comment of the good Lord gave me the ability to work hard. That was his big thing. But he didn't express his faith, but he lived his faith. And that was what kind of cemented in a way of life, a way of service, and a way of commitment to God's message, which is, to love mankind.
Yeah. It is not unusual for Midwesterners to be reluctant to talk about their faith in explicit terms, but clearly the language of action is the language of faith for your father. Now, what about your mother? You mentioned something about your mother had introduced you to life in the church. Any comment about your mother's influence?
My mother was a first-generation immigrant to North Dakota and came from Denmark with, her parents came from Denmark, with a strong Christian faith. I had 4 sisters. She grew us up in the church. I was confirmed, I was baptized in the Presbyterian church before I could remember, obviously. But she was the one that made sure that we as her offspring, or that her children, she was the one that made sure that we went to church, not only to go to church, but to serve the church.
Mm-hmm.
So we were the family, minus my dad, that were there to clean the kitchen afterwards, to pick up whatever, to sing in the choir, to participate with the church family. Mm-hmm. And that was really her message, is, incorporate yourself with people of like faith that have a mission from God, and that will deliver. And so her influence on my life was one of incorporation in the church family, and that's been an important effort for me developing my faith.
Mm-hmm. Shift gears a little bit, thinking about education, and particularly higher education. UND undergraduate in business, then an MBA from the University of Denver. I'm wondering if there were mentors or experiences in those 2 places that you feel fundamentally shaped your direction, your trajectory as a leader?
I think in a secular setting, I have to admit that about the time I left home and went to the University of North Dakota was about the time I fell away from the church. That I was struggling through all those kinds of things and issues, and really didn't seek that church family when I was at the university. But I had a lot of influences in my life externally
Okay.
from that, and a lot in the leadership role. One that comes to mind is my brother-in-law. When I was convinced I didn't want to work for my dad, I was going to work for the family company. There's no way I want to do my own thing, sing my own song, do
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And my brother-in-law, when I had the opportunity to work for the company, said, "Hey, you should try it. You should just really go out and try it and do it. You're young, you're capable."
Mhm.
He said I was smart. That's a quote. I'm not, I'm not advancing that system. But he said, pick a period of time, go to work for the company. If it works out, great, you're there. If it doesn't, you can leave and still do something else. But don't ever be 50 years old or 60 years old and look back and say, gee, what if, could I have done it, should I have done it? And it kind of fell back to one of my dad's philosophy of risk, because he started his own company. Everybody told him, no, you can't do it. Bankers, my mom, everybody,
Yeah.
keep your job. So my dad was always saying, I don't see risk. The good Lord gave me the ability to work hard. I know I can always put food on the table and clothes on you kids. That's all I have to worry about. And so that risk was, okay, I'm going to go to work for the company. I did. It was good. They liked me. I liked them, and it worked out well, and I was there until we sold the company 15 years later. So that was really good advice, and I want to divert one piece, if you bear. When I went for the work for the company, this leadership lesson I've picked up and carried throughout my life from my interview. Now, I wasn't going to work for my dad. I had the opportunity. There was a post open in the East Coast, and I flew out to interview for the position. Now, interviewing for the company that your dad runs, is a little different, but not so hard. But anyway, I was going to be visiting with this person, and so we talked all day. And in the end, he said, "Look, there are some things I want you to know. Number one is I have 2 sons, and if this were my company, I'd want them to work here. And so I have no problem with you being the boss's son, etc." Secondly, he said, you are going to be held to a high standard because you are the boss's son. And you're not going to be getting away. And this guy was 6'8", All-American basketball player. He looked down at me and he said, if you mess up, I'm going to be the first one on your back. You're going to be doing good work here, or you're not going to be here. And then the third thing he said, which really is an important leadership lesson, is he said, I don't know how this is going to work out. You don't know how this is going to work out. You might like it, you might not. But he said, I'll tell you this. I'll teach you every single thing I know, because someday you may end up being my boss. And if that happens, I want you to be better than I am. So, the leadership lesson is you don't create followers in leadership. You surround yourself with other leaders and enhance other leaders. And that's how you raise your leadership profile. So it was a lesson. Sorry for the diversion off of the faith, but it was when you think about leadership and you think about your relationship with other people, developing that kind of a working relationship is pretty important.
That was really significant to have someone like that to work with, who would be honest with you and would hold you to high expectations and would give you good advice.
Definitely.
I want to shift gears now to the discussion of values, and we had a great discussion about this the other morning. And if this discussion is only half that good, why, it'll have been a good afternoon. But could you describe what you think of as some of your core values?
I can. The interesting trail to get to my core values was one time on a New Year's Day, I sat down and wrote a list. If I were named Supreme Ruler, these are the things I'd change. Right? They were pretty selfish, pretty things that would return to me. But over the years, I kept going back to that list, and I kept changing it and refining it and going after it. And eventually, it became a list that I didn't change anymore. And as I would read through that, I said, okay, this is what I stand for. This is what I believe. These are my core values that I take forth. So when I started trying to figure out how to use my core values in my leadership roles, that gave me a lot of strength because I knew who I was, I knew what I stood for, and one of the huge positions that a leader can take is consistency. You know, one of the dramatic attributes of a good leader is consistency, the consistent delivery of yourself, of your honesty, of your integrity, of the way you work, the way you expect other people to work. Those are, so I was able to be consistent because I knew who I was. And that consistency then is what led to, especially in our times of public service, the core values that strengthen out that said, first of all, you tell the truth. Secondly, you serve all the people all the time. And that's both in the secular and the business and the political world, because we all have people we serve, but you serve all the people all the time. Thirdly, you want to do the right thing. And as a fourth tenet that I've always carried is solve the problem. Solving the problem is always what you're there for, right?
Right.
So I've been able to carry those core values and intertwine them. And where it really gives you the strength is, for instance, when Nancy and I went into public service and when we were elected to serve the people of North Dakota as governor, you always wondered, where are you with your faith? Where can you do in the secular world? Can you say something? Can't you? How do you present your commitment to God and things like that and to your life? And having a sense of what your core values are and what they stand for gives you that opportunity to say, hey, this is who I am. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And that makes me live my life in a certain way. And that was then easy to present while we tried to bridge that gap between the secular and the faith community. Nancy and I, because of that, were able to sit down and say, as we get into this, we're not only going to be leaders in our government, but we're going to be leaders in our faith.
Important decisions.
Very.
And core values have certainly shaped you. We had a discussion the other day in which I said, did you ever find yourself at a place where you felt that you had compromised in your core value commitments? And you said yes.
Well, I did, and I was thinking more that as we talked, that I thought it was more of a situation where I should have changed or gone against my values.
Yeah, go ahead with that.
And if that's the one you're thinking about, or what else. I was faced with a situation when I was in the governor's office of a local community trying to take eminent domain, which is taking land from a private holder, and taking eminent domain, which is a valuable government program for things of rights of way for roads and things, and just compensation when somebody doesn't want to sell, but when you might need it for the public good, it's important. In this case, however, Jamestown, North Dakota was taking some land from a private individual and giving it to another private individual to build, in this business, a grocery store that would be competitive with the grocery store that was there because they thought it was for the advancement of the community. One of the core values that I carry, as you mentioned, is solve the problem. So we always felt that the closest way to solve the problem, the closest solution, the best solution is the one that's closest to that problem. So our effort in the Capitol was often, we pushed stuff down to the local level. We tried to push the decisions, the efforts, the policies into the local level and the county commissions and the city councils and the things that make those kinds of decisions for the people whom they serve. As we started doing that, then this Jamestown wanted to take this piece of land. They decided to do so. It was appealed to the governor's office, and we were going, okay, basically if our effort is to say the best solution is local, and we've spent all our time in the Capitol here saying go local, I have to support the local decision. So that was the value that came out. Years later, there was a case in New London, Connecticut, where the same thing, they were trying to take a piece of land from an individual, give it to another individual or corporation to build some housing. And they said, this housing we need for the public good. It went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled on a 5-4 basis that under the takings law in the Fifth Amendment, that it was permissible for this community to swap land from one private owner to another for the future of economic development or for the betterment of economic development. They said it was allowable under the Constitution. They didn't say it was right. And as I studied that case and went through it, having been there myself, I really came to the conclusion that it's not right for government to step in and create competition for a private business and a private landowner in a private situation like that. And I think my decision was wrong.
And you've lived with it.
Well, you have to live with it, for sure.
Are there any other leaders in the room that might have regrets about a decision? There you go. But thank you for giving that illustration. Shifting gears a little bit about leadership, you got involved in public life, in politics. And I'm just wondering, what led you to that? What, both in terms of experience and conviction, what led you to public service?
Well, I appreciate answering that question here in the Offutt School of Business.
Okay.
Because I came at it from a business perspective. Yeah. And I know we have some business students here today, and you know, I appreciate this trail that I went on because my experience was in the business world. I had no interest in politics. I barely got enough energy to vote. You know, I was like, no, I don't like it. And but I came to the conclusion in the 1970s that business was a solution to many of government problems. And I was on an international board of a cosmetics industry situation. I was interacting with these business leaders who had billions of dollars in sales, hundreds of thousands of employees, and I'm talking to them about, you know, why can't you solve these problems? Why don't you run for office? Why don't you, you know, why don't you go? And people were resistant. Business folks just don't, you measure things differently, you react to things differently. There's not an easy transition from the business world to the public sector. And yet, and of course, you can't run government like a business, and that's true. But I felt that the attributes of business, the qualities of business can transfer. And at a time in our country where things were jumbled up, when we had high interest rates, when things were difficult, the country was kind of going down the tubes. People were wondering, well, what's going on? Where are our leaders? No, not today. This was in the 70s. but you know, I was saying, you know, business attributes can solve some of the problems in government. So I said accounting, budgeting, operations, personnel, leadership. Those are attributes that I learned in the business world and I thought were readily transferable to the public sector. I complained about that a lot until some friends sat me down and said, you know, why don't you shut up and do something about it? You know, so I said, the only place that I can do that is in the governor's office. That, I mean, where you're the head administrator and you're going to operate and deliver the services and goods of a government system, you got to be in the governor's office. Yes. So I said, I'm going to run for governor. And everybody said, you can't. You have to be dog catcher first. You know, I mean, you have to work your way up the system. And my dad said, well, why don't you run for Secretary of State or something? And I was like, not to disparage the Secretary of State, but you know, I mean, it just wasn't in the cards. And yet I felt like, you know, my mission, if I wanted to accomplish what I believed in, which was the attributes of business can be successful in the public sector, I had to do it. Yeah. And I ran.
One of the themes of your leadership as governor was the emphasis on service, the emphasis on treating citizens as consumers, as customers. And I wonder if you'd say a little bit about how you tried to inculcate that point of view into state government.
The effort with a
If I may, in other words, if you're an auditor, your job isn't to be an auditor. Your job is to serve the needs of people whose accounts you're attempting to oversee in a way that's helpful.
I had an interesting view of bureaucracy
Right.
when I took office,
Mhm.
and I think all of us from the outside that have frustrations and difficulties with their government, and you don't like what's going on, and they don't deliver the services, and they're too slow, and you go through all of that. And so I had this certain image of bureaucracy. And when we arrived at the Capitol, it became apparent that the bureaucracy were really those people, the permanent employees, the people that had been there a long time, who really were responsible for delivering the services of government. And they were the ones that were going to get it done, not the governor or the lieutenant governor or the legislature. That what I then called the bureaucracy, which I now call the permanent employee base, they're the ones that had to deliver. So we had to shift that way to say, you are responsible for delivering it. The best way that you can deliver is to be that closest to the customer, to understand what they want, and to give it to them. So we embarked on several things. One, the bureaucracy that we complain about is because we tend to put fences around the cubicles that they all work in. And that means, something bad happened one time, so you pinch them in. We take away their judgment. You say, you fill these boxes, you make these check marks, and that's your decision. We say, we're not gonna punish the bad guys. We're going to handcuff 99% of the good people by putting these rules and regulations and places in. So the employees operate under a fence of saying, this is the only thing I can do. I can't use my judgment. I can't use, I might make a decision this way one time and that way a different way. So we fence them in. So I said, okay, we're taking the fences off. We're going to put the responsibility of decisions on your plate. And I, as the chief executive officer, is not to lead you. I am to be here the one that takes away the barriers that are in place so you can't do your job. If you have something where you can't get your job done, that gets on my desk. I'll fix it. So that we encourage the population to serve. And it took a long time. The example I used the other day was 8 years. Nancy and I served 2 terms. 8 years after there, and we did videos, we did interactive meetings with all the employees. We did pamphlets, about service. 8 years after we were in the Capitol, when I was leaving, I was down in the cafeteria, and one of the people in the cafeteria, serving in the cafeteria, came up to me and said, I'm finally getting what you're talking about, as we serve people in this cafeteria. It's my job to lift them up, my job to make them happy, my job to deliver them on a good day. And it was like, finally, 8 years later, it got down there. But that, you had to take the fences away from them and let them do their jobs, and that's what really made a difference.
Ed was telling me about going to all of these state employee groups, one at a time, often with Nancy, and really selling this message about service. And I just think that was not only a good example, but it was work equity, which really made a difference.
And as a follow-on on that, when I took office, one of my sisters gave me a book The Leadership of Jesus. Small little, thin book that I kept on my desk that I could go through that. But, servant leadership comes from the teaching of Jesus. And, that should help the delivery of anything that we do. When you serve, you lead.
I've got a question that we didn't discuss, but you told me I should surprise you. So now I will. And background, I think one of the things that impressed a lot of us about your period as governor was the fact that both the United States senators and the United States congressperson were of the other party. But on key issues, the four of you knew what you needed to do and presented, I think about technology, I think about flood control, and I think about energy development. You really were in alignment and found ways to work together in spite of your differences, right? You weren't going to pretend you didn't have different points of view. You didn't, they didn't, but you were able to find the common ground to get things done. Can you say a word about that?
North Dakota is, I think, a better place for operate that. We have our political skirmishes. We fight and claw and whatever you have to do to get elected. But in our state, it's nice. It's a nice situation where once you're elected, now we serve. Now we do what's right for the people. Going back to my tenet of doing what is right. And so you set aside the political differences, not that you don't have them.
Right.
But you say, well, what's best for the people? What should we do? How do you take your idea and my idea and combine them and get a better relationship with the people that are out there? It's an interesting situation because you're charged by the political electorate to take a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times we hear today, we have to elect people that are going to stand by their principles, that stand by their effort, that are going to stand and do what they say they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yet then after you're elected, you get into office and you find out, well, there might be something that I should do, have to do, the right thing to do, that might be a little off from what I was thinking, or a little different. And I was fortunate enough to learn as I went along, trial by error, or whatever, a lot of it. I was fortunate to be able to understand that I can carry my principles and still adjust those principles in a meaningful way to help people.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ever felt that, if we were talking about justice for the citizens, that I had to compromise my values. But I had to realize that people might have different values and different ways of looking at things, and how do I carry my values into that arena and incorporate both sides of the issue, or whatever.
Yeah.
If I can tell a story.
Yeah, please tell.
If we have time, shortly after I was in office, the lesson that I learned was in North Dakota, the governor has to approve a land sale that takes land off the public rolls, so off public tax rolls. So if there are a piece of land that's going to be donated to the Nature Conservancy, for instance, or a piece that's going to be taken by a government entity to create a wetlands, or whatever the case may be, if it comes off the tax rolls, the governor has to approve it. So shortly after I was in office, there was a farm and a farm ranch and grasslands area down in south Richland County, south of here, and the Nature Conservancy wanted to buy the property. It's a beautiful piece of property called Pigeon Point. Had prairie orchids on it, major prairie orchids, had virgin grass on it. It had a piece that was being farmed. It had a piece that was allowable for hunting and nature and things like that. The Nature Conservancy came in and they said, hey, we want to do this, and these are the reasons why, and it makes a whole bunch of sense, and so they left, and I thought, this is going to be easy. They just gave me all the answers, they gave me everything, the reasons that I should do this. Well, then shortly after that, the proponent or the opponents came in, which is the city commission and the county guys, and we're not going to get the tax revenues, and and this and that, and so they then told us all the reasons why I shouldn't allow the sale. And now I was in a dilemma because both of them had very good presentations. And what I learned through that is when you're grappling with those kinds of dilemmas. It isn't the good guy or the bad guy or the winner and loser. What it is everybody comes at it from the right. I mean, everybody is right when they take their position. They're thoughtful about it, scholarly about it, prayerful about it. They arrive at a position, and it may be what I believe, it may not what I believe, but they're right, and someone else is right. And so to be able to sort out for what's best for the common good without trying to assign good guy and bad guy really allows you to interact in the arena, still carry your core principles and your beliefs, but allows you to interact into the arena, say what's best for the good and for the common good, and then you can shape it to work within your parameters of ethics or integrity or character, and still deliver what's needed for the people.
Yeah. I can't help wondering how we could reestablish such practices, but we won't go into that.
Yeah.
Let me wind this up by asking you to tell us what are 2 or 3 achievements that have made you most proud?
Well, pride is an interesting factor, when we deal with the biblical aspects of pride.
Here, which 2 or 3 things have brought you the most joy?
Yeah.
Let's go there.
The first one that comes to mind is in public services, in positions of authority. It's a place where you really need to hang your ego up on the wall about 10 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
People are very supportive. They want to carry your books. They want to shoot the pigeons for you. I mean, people really care about you and are lifting you up all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty easy to say, I deserve it, or I'm great, or I'm wonderful. And so they're doing that because of me. A lot of times they're doing it because of the position or the title. But it's pretty easy to step up on that stool and say, I'm awesome. And you need to learn to set that aside. Most people in the political arena don't. It gets to your head, and it's easily to get to your head. And one of the conversations that Nancy and I had when we were considering seeking a third term, in North Dakota doesn't have term limits, right. So we were wondering whether we should seek a third term or not. And one of the things we talked about was we're starting to get a different relationship with the people than we had in the beginning, because of all those things. It's different when you walk in as governor and first lady than when you walk in as somebody from the street to the service counter at the auto dealership, and have a chat. So I think one of the blessings that I had in office was when we decided not to seek a third term. We told everybody about it, and I said one of the leadership attributes is consistency. The director of office and management and budget came into my office, and he said, so I've been here for 8 years. I've been with you for 8 years. And he said, I never once walked into your office and didn't know what the answer was going to be. And he said, not that we tried to maneuver, but he said, we knew what you stood for. We knew we knew who you were and what you wanted to do and what you wanted to accomplish. And so we could prepare knowing where you wanted this organization to go. That was important to me. The second thing I remember is our scheduler came in. Scheduling is the toughest job in any administration. She came in and sat down and said, I've served 4 governors. And she said, you're going to be the only one that is going to walk out of here the same person you were as you were when you came in. Wow. And that was a victory.
Yeah.
That was a huge victory.
I'll say. Yeah. So the final...
And I should say, Nancy and I, our relationship survived during the pressures of public service and family life and all those kinds of things. Relationships aren't always enhanced by your time in public service. Right. And we were able to maneuver those minefields Not that we didn't have some difficult times, but we're here
Yeah,
together
yeah.
today.
Still friends.
Yeah.
So here's the final question. To whom are you most grateful?
I have to think of something I hear always on on the campus of Concordia. Soli Deo Gloria. To God is the glory.
Good answer. Good answer. Yeah.
We didn't rehearse that one either.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I simply observe the kind of consistency that we've seen in your work in the private sector, the public sector, and now multiple sectors. It's remarkable. And now it's your turn. I know you've been sitting there saying, why didn't Paul ask this? And why did he ask that? And now it's up to you to make the questions. And as I said, what we'll do, because of the size of this group, we'll say one question per questioner, and that will get us around the room. And Faith is going to do the first question. Yeah. Privilege of the director.
Well, so when you would face difficulties, as I imagine you would in business, public life, UND, what helped you through it?
What helped me through it, I believe, is when I look at difficulties. First of all, I've been able to recognize that there are always two sides of an issue or five sides of an issue, and those people are right. But what has gotten me through the difficult times certainly has been the juncture of faith and work, which says, I'm in this for the long haul. My promise from God is a relationship with him in heaven when I go to his side. That's a long-term view, hopefully. When you're facing a difficult decision, it's, this might affect me personally, this may not get me votes, this might, these people are going to be mad at me. Our oldest daughter says you're in a business where 49% of people are mad at you at all times. Right? But thinking, okay, if this is the way things are going to unfold, then it gives you the confidence to say, okay, this is tough today. This is difficult. I have been blessed with the ability to make those decisions. I've been blessed to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. I've also been blessed to understand that the decision I make might not be the right one over the long term, but I have to make one. And I can't get paralyzed by not making it, saying, well, shoot, I don't have enough information, I don't know what's going on. I have to trust my principles and my guide, and I have to make that decision, knowing that I may have to make a different decision later to fix it. But it's that long-term view that I pick up from being a Christian, in my feet at the cross of Jesus, to say that's where I'm ending up. And what I do here on this earth, I have to try to do as best I can. But that long-term view has really helped me out in tough times.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yes, Bruce.
Governor, I've heard you speak many times about your summers in Medora. And my question is, do you feel that the various jobs and things that you did as a teenager in Medora had some influence on your future life?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no doubt that being in a situation in the early days of Medora was a huge learning experience for me. And Bruce is on the board of the Medora Foundation, so he knows how to ask that question. But my dad's philosophy was work. I mean, all he was about was work. And so, growing up, that was all about work. But in the early days of Medora, the work was whatever needs to be done. So we had this broad experience of being someday you're making ice cream, someday you're pounding nails. You mentioned we were peeling the bark off the logs to build the Schaefer cabin. I served as a short order cook. I was a carpenter. I was the manager of the motel. I had to take the deposits to the bank. I had all kinds of jobs there for several years. And where that was so beneficial is, one, the interaction with the consumer or the organization, whatever the case may be. So you learned the biblical principle of meeting people where they are. And that's, we had talked the other day about leadership and what leadership attributes I may be blessed with or not. One is the ability to meet people where they are. And so I can walk up to a carpenter, a mechanic, a plumber, the king of Norway, everybody in between, president of the United States, and I can engage in a conversation that's meaningful to them. And that's a huge thing. And I learned that in Medora because it wasn't the physical task that I happened to be doing at the time. It was the interaction with people and why I was doing that task and what accomplishment I was trying to make. And that gave me that sense of if you're going to lead, you have to be able to collect the communal wisdom and present that to people in a way that's meaningful to their lives. Hard work, broad experience, the ability to interact with people at all levels, I learned in Medora, and that just carried me through the years.
Let's see. Back there and then up here. Okay.
When I walked in here, Governor Schaefer said I can ask the toughest question. You mentioned, Dr. Dowry said when one of the questions happened to be about the surprise. And something that I'm struggling with, I know one of the reasons that I admire you is because you're a man of faith. And one of the values that you have is doing the right thing for the right reason. And it also happened to be one of my values too. My question has to do with the political parties and bring you back into the politics. And what is happening in the political system right now in this country, not only in the state, driven by the parties. And as you governor, I'm sure there were situations where political parties were driving certain things, issues, brought forth to you, and you were not in agreement. How did you manage that balancing act? And there were part of the reason I'm asking that question is because after my wife passed away last 6 years, or even the last 6 years, many people took me out and, Prakash, I think you should consider a political office. I don't think I can compromise. There are certain values, and also particularly the value of doing the right thing for the right reason, not necessarily what the party may want. So if I'm elected by a party, I don't know how I will be able to manage it. How did you manage that as a governor?
Well, we've been having a good time. You had to ruin it, right, with getting into politics. We've talked a little bit here about carrying your values and learning how to create the common good without compromising your values. That doesn't happen a lot today in the political parties, and it doesn't happen a lot today because the electorate is so jumbled up. They're demanding people stand on this principle, and a lot of people in the election cycle have single issues that they want solved by government. As I tried to maneuver that field and the political party, what I tried to understand was and Nancy will be disappointed because she's heard this 200 times, 500 times over and over. But the politics of politics is getting elected. It's what you do and say and react and present, and it's winning the hearts and minds of people to get enough votes to get in the office. That's the politics of politics. The piece of staying in office is the politics of performance. And so when you get there, you have to shift from the politics of politics to the politics of performance. And when you shift to the politics of performance, and most politicians can't do this, by the way, which is why I'm an advocate of having people from the outside coming into the political structure. You shift to the politics of performance, then you are performing for what the people are looking for what's best for the good. How do you shape the community and the culture and the society in the best way possible? Because you're performing. You're doing the job that you're supposed to do. Here's an example. I don't know if this is a good one or not, but it came to mind when you asked the question. So political parties have a platform, and they have all these meetings, and they go together, and they fight and vote and, you know, jump up and down, and they say, this is our platform, this is what we stand for. I used in the political arena in the state of North Dakota, I used that platform and the principle, or the guiding principles of that platform, the overall view of that platform, as a Republican in my case, in my Republican Party. I used that when I ran. It helped craft the policies we talked about. It helped craft the direction. It helped craft to say, this is what we stand for. This is what I stand for. When I was elected for 8 years, I never once looked at that party platform. You know, I mean, it got me there, but it wasn't the guiding principle when I was in office. Guiding principle when I was in office was to serve the people. And I think that's the difference. And I wish that more and more, as I said, I talk about this too much, but if we could, as the political structure, learn to shift from the politics of politics and getting elected to the politics of performances, representing the people, then you can carry that balancing act of what you stand for and what you deliver.
Okay, next question right here. Here it is.
Earlier this summer, Pope Francis warned the world's leading oil executives and political leaders that without their cooperation and help, climate change caused by the burning of fossil fuels would put human civilization at risk, and that urgent action was needed. As a past and maybe even present lobbyist for the North Dakota oil industry, what is your view of global climate change?
Well, I think as we have seen conditions in our world change, climate-wise, we have obviously come to a point of agreement of saying our climate is changing. It's moving. We dealt with this a lot in the agriculture arena when I was in Washington as Secretary of Agriculture, because cropping patterns are changing. Weather patterns are changing. We're growing rice in different areas. In North Dakota, we're growing corn, which we've never done before. You know, all of the weather's being different. And, you know, it's interesting, for instance, 50% of the world's nutrition comes from rice. A 2-degree change in the morning temperature in rice can decimate the crop. And so as we see that climate changing and shifting, the question is, what do we do about it? And my view of the fossil view versus the renewable fuel or the renewable issue is one of time. My view is we have baseline energy that's being delivered by coal right now. We have billions of cars driving around that are being, that are fueled by gasoline or corn. We have baseline energies, and we need to be there. We need to support those energies. We need to support our populations in a lifestyle that we're accustomed to. And that accustomed lifestyle is what we have today. At the same time, we need to invest in the renewables energy and the clean energy and the things that take place. So while we are, for instance, you mentioned oil. Oil is a declining resource. You pull the oil out of the ground, you can't put it back in. So it gradually is going away. We need to be investing in wind energy and solar energy and nuclear fusion energy and things that are going to take years and years to develop, that are going to take tons and tons of money to develop, both private money and public money. And as we move through this weather change model and argue about what it's being caused by and who's causing it, and 97% of the carbon in the atmosphere is generated by the environment and those kinds of things, how can we affect it? We can affect it by long-term investment and not jumping off the cliff for what we have, but developing the processes for what we're going to need in the future. And we're along that path. We're having huge political arguments about how fast it needs to be done and who should do it and where the investment is and who gets thrown out of their jobs, their current jobs, to support the new jobs. The most difficult thing that you have in a government arena is the effort to maintain the present while you invest in the future. And that's a delicate balance and a difficulty of resource allocation, both human and capital, and it's one that we have to be mindful of. So the climate change issue, I think, is important. We see it. We also can go saying, we have the cycles of climate change up and down for eons. I always find it interesting, I'm sorry to ramble on here, but I always find it interesting that when we say we broke the heat record, it was like from 1955, or 1932, or something like that. It's like, okay, so we're back up on the heat cycle.
Yeah.
But we have a cyclical weather pattern. We have cyclical environment, and we can deal with it. But I don't think you should throw out the current to prepare for the future.
One more question. Right here, a student, I think.
Hello, Governor. Merci beaucoup for your wonderful words today. So I was just curious with the servant leadership you've had for this wonderful state and the numerous hats you've worn. I was really curious. I find your way of answering very eloquent and very graceful. Can you teach us or share with us the art of converting an opponent and maybe a supporter / a voter in a time where diplomacy seems to be on the bench right now? And secondly was, in a small state like North Dakota, a past opponent, how do you meet or cross path at the lakes or whatever, and how, because again, it's a very small state, so with all the numerous hats you've worn as a business leader, as a public servant, how do you navigate this? And so first of all, teach us how to convert an opponent into a potential supporter. And second, how to navigate okay, that was my hat 20 years ago, now we can just be regular citizen and friends. Thank you.
So you get two questions in one. There you are.
I did. So we'll, when I started, I said I'm used to having the opponent sit on the other side of the moderator.
Right.
So we'll end up with the same, the same situation. But how do you convert an opponent's thinking? From my standpoint, is I don't try to convert an opponent's thinking. Because, as I said earlier, everybody's coming at from what they believe. They've studied it. They've prayed about it. This is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is what I think my philosophy is. This is, how I direct my life. So I don't think that it's appropriate for me to go in and say, I'm going to change you. I'm going to convert you. You're wrong. You're stupid. You're crazy. Sometimes they are, but you say, okay, I'm not going to convert you, but let's talk about solving the problem. Let's talk about the goals that you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to deal with a healthcare issue, take the politics of it. What specifically are you trying to do? Now, we may be in agreement for the goal. You may want to do it tomorrow. I want to maybe phase it in so it's done over 5 years. But that doesn't mean that we aren't in agreement with where we want to end up. And so if you take away the trying to convince somebody to change and say, let's concentrate on what we want to accomplish. Let's concentrate on what we want to deliver. And what's the best way to do that? What's our experience in what's happened or didn't happen in the past? What's the history tell us of what happens if you do A, B arrives? How do we shape the conversation into what's best? That's where I've changed my mind at sometimes, talked myself into change. I've talked to others and felt that, as you move through, the common good comes through, the focus on the long-term aspect and the focus on what can we accomplish together really brings people together instead of fighting with each other and opposing each other. How do we all be friends? I think I like what comes to mind is I don't quote the Bible, but because I can't. But Micah chapter 6 verse 8, I think says, he has shown us what is good.
Mm-hmm.
No, he has shown us what is good.
Mm-hmm.
And what the Lord requires of you is to do what is right, to seek justice, and to walk humbly with the God. So that, I think, brings the friendship of Jesus to the table.
Governor, this has been a great conversation, and when people that are thinking about running for public office go to candidate preparation school, they are instructed that when a question is asked, they shouldn't answer the question, they should give their own message, whatever that might be. Well, what a wonderful exception we have to that rule today when a governor actually answers directly the questions that are asked, which is what he has done historically. And he has exemplified today, I think, the core values that he mentions have guided him in so many ways. And that's been a great gift to us here today. So.
And there are some people who had hands up and stuff that we didn't get to. We'll be around for a while if you were too bashful or if you didn't get your question in. We're glad to do them here.
So thanks to you, and especially thanks to the governor.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. It's 1 o'clock, so you're free to go. Come back next month for another one.
Thank you.
Thank you.